It was a passionate hobby of mine because I was actually building my own firm, so I didn't have 100% of my time to dedicate to it. But we sort of made inroads and we made strides and we had some small wins as we went along. We were then, because of that work, we were instrumental in helping get impact investing off the ground and impact entrepreneurship. So we thought we were doing okay, but of course, when we actually looked at the real results, they were infinitesimal in what was needed. In 2006, I was very blessed to sell my firm in New York City. And by 2008, I was able to dedicate my life to the work I wanted to pursue. And that started with trying to understand why in a world of abundance, we actually have poverty. Because this divide we're seeing in America between the have and the have-nots is endemic of what's happened around the world in many instances. And so how could we do this on a planet where we have enough of everything we need? So I was already working with the UN, and I showed up at the UN one day and said, why do we still have poverty? And the answers they gave me were deplorable. And so I went to some foundations, some endowments, some not-for-profits, and said, well, why do we still have poverty? And no one could really give me the answer. So we decided as a family that, okay, well, let's go find out. So we hired a company, a professional firm, to put together focus groups, design focus groups for us that we could take around the world and hold in marginalized communities in different countries. And they were structured as such. We would take about 20 of the eldest people in a community, who were generally around 80 years of age, and put them in one room, while at the same time we would have about 20 people from the same community who were in their early 20s in a separate room. And they were asked the same questions. And those questions generally related to what were the choke points that they saw preventing any progress. The only difference was that in the octogenarian room, those folks were then asked a second set of questions, which was now think back 50 or 60 years to when you were in your early 20s, and what were the problems then? And once everyone had finished, we brought them in the same room where we had waiting the community leaders, religious leaders, not-for-profit leaders, business leaders, if they would show up, municipal government leaders, etc., to share the results. And in every country we were in, the results were the same. In every community we were in, the results were the same. More horrifically, the answers from the 80-somethings and the 20-somethings were almost identical. But even more horrific than that were the answers from 60 years ago were the same as the answers today. So the only conclusion you could draw was that nothing has changed. Well, if you take the last 60 years, millions of people with big hearts and they really care have been given through donations, government grants, whatever else you want to call it, billions and billions and billions of dollars. And these are not the poor. These are the people saying they can fix poverty to fix poverty. And it's worse. So you cannot help but say to yourself, why? So after a lot of heated debate, we were able to drill down to the reasons why, and the presentation you're about to see is going to show you the results, and then our construct after that, how we deployed it and how it works. So any questions about that sort of preamble, that context? No? Okay. So Jennifer, can you allow me to share my screen? I think I can start sharing. Okay, here we go. Desktop.
Yeah, I think you
share.
Are do that.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. You should be able to see a PowerPoint presentation that just sort of popped up. Can you all see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. So, sorry about this. This is what happens when you have creative students do PowerPoints for you. I wouldn't even know how to do that, but I also don't know how to get rid of it. So we'll just go to the next slide. Okay, so why do we have poverty? Well, the first thing that we discovered was that poverty is actually an economic model. And if you look at this chart, what you'll see is in global finance, when we're talking about global economies, we're all taught in school, higher risk, higher reward. That's what's drummed into us in economics and in finance. But actually what happens is when you look at the structure of global corporations that manage finances and economies around the world, they actually work like this. The most important thing to the people running many of those companies is executive comp, because that's how they compete with each other and they measure each other against that. Second, certainly used to be and still is, unfortunately, in many instances, financial shareholders, because if you keep them happy, you keep your job. Then it's the supply chain, then it's your employees, and the people and planet at the bottom are last. And so what happens is that instead of it being highest risk, highest reward, evidenced by the emails we all saw in the market crash where people were talking about nuclear waste and sell it to the public. At the top of the pyramid, you have lowest risk, highest reward, and at the bottom, you have highest risk, lowest reward. And unfortunately, that's what makes the world go round. So the people and planet at the bottom are taking the most risk with the lowest reward, and it's obviously vice versa at the top. And through our, I'm sorry, this type is so small, but through our focus groups, what we found was that in every instance, the cause of poverty was lack of economic vibrancy. We all see the effects. And so obviously, if you see a hungry child, you want to feed that child. And if you don't fix the problem, the reason why the child's hungry, you're going to be doing that forever. So we didn't see a lot of people focusing on fixing the cause. We saw a lot of people focusing on fixing the effects. So we realized that, again, poverty is an economic model. We realized that we have extracted pretty much everything we can from people. We've extracted their land, we've extracted their capital, we've extracted their hopes, their dreams, and in free labor, and in some instances, their very souls. So we had to stop extracting. When we looked at the initiatives that were focused on the effects, what we saw, and it certainly wasn't deliberate, that most were designed to be win-lose, meaning if a certain segment of a community was to sort of benefit or win, another segment had to lose. Well, that's not going to last very long. We saw that many, many initiatives were not inclusive. We saw this tendency for people to believe that they can fix other people's problems. Well, that's very, very difficult to do. It's much better to empower people to fix their own problems by providing them the knowledge and information and tools and context and contacts and capital they need to do that. We noticed that there were a multitude of capital flow choke points. And so that all around the world, people tend to demonize the top and bottom of the socio-economic pyramid, which is wrong. And that when capital gets released, only very small amounts of it actually finds its way to the bottom to fund these bottom-up innovations that are so important. So we realized we had to remove capital flow choke points. A lot of intellectual arrogance around the world, people coming up with all kinds of wonderful ideas, but actually not prepared to do the work to implement them. People trying to fix problems from afar. So you're 6,000 miles away, you write a check and you think, well, that will do it. Well, no, you've got to be in place. And so that's what came out of the research. And now I can't, for some reason, if I click on this maybe. So once we felt that we had landed on the true problems, the true cause, not just the effects. The effects are, of course, gentrification, homelessness, in many cases, racism, lack of access to transportation, lack of access to education, lack of access to healthcare, food deserts. I mean, the list goes on and on. But we decided that we were going to fix the cause, that we were going to use business and economics to fix the cause, because for the last 60 years, at least in America, we've been fighting economics with charity. And frankly, you may as well take a knife to a gunfight. That's not going to work. we realized that we needed each solution to be win-win. And so, and 100% inclusive. So every person, every community stakeholder be represented in a new economic model where you had initiatives for every stakeholder that benefited that particular stakeholder. But more importantly, if one stakeholder benefits, it's not left to happen chance that all other stakeholders benefit. Be inclusive, have a circular economy, unlock the capital flow choke points, and place balance at the center. So that was our canvas, and now you're about to see what we did. So when you build a circular economy, you have every circle has a core. Our myopic focus is on inclusion, resiliency, and economic, social, and environmental balance. Now, I want to be transparent about the word balance, and this is where narratives matter. I'm not suggesting this is right or wrong, but it worked for us. In many places in the world, the second that we mentioned the word injustice, people became defensive and they didn't want to collaborate. And because that's how we started, we need to go from injustice to justice. We did a test where we replaced injustice with imbalance and justice with balance. No issue. People didn't feel we were accusing them of something, and they started to collaborate. So that's why we use the word balance, just to be totally transparent. We were first invited to pilot this work in Paraguay by the president of Paraguay. And that gave us insight into the fact that no matter where we were in the world, the stakeholders, the community stakeholders that we brought into this new economy are the same. However, the order in which you place them in the economy changes based upon whether or not the country that you're in was founded on feudalism or mercantilism, and the maturity of the economy of the country or the region they're in at the time of your presence. Now, what you're about to see is a 6-year pilot that we ran to prove this model works in Charleston, South Carolina. It's important to note that when I came to Charleston 8 years ago, I knew nobody. I was not a graduate of CFC. I was not a donor. I was not on the board. In fact, I knew nobody there. And the first community stakeholder we wanted to bring into this new model was an educational institution. Now, it doesn't have to be a college. It could be a high school, and it can be any college or high school that someone scaling this in their own community chooses. We chose the College of Charleston. I went to see the then president, Glenn McConnell, and the person who's still the current dean of the business school, Alan Shaw. And I said that I would build them a center of impact studies where we would have accredited classes on impact entrepreneurship and investing, impact management and leadership, which is basically profit and purpose, all the things you see on that screen. That we would embed consequential learning. I don't know about you all, when I went to school, someone wrote something on a chalkboard and said, learn that. And God forbid you ask why, but that's how it was in England at least, and that was called academic learning. People far more brilliant than I really migrated that to experiential learning, probably in the United States is my guess, in the sort of 80s or 90s. And we've coined the phrase consequential learning, teaching the students something that really has consequence to people or planet or the economy. So we said we'd introduce consequential learning. We would enhance the school's relationships with all segments of the community. They obviously already had a good relationship with the business community. We said we would enhance it. The school had a very poor relationship, if any, with certain marginalized segments of our community, and for good reason. The marginalized segments had never been embraced by the school. They didn't see the school as an asset. They never felt that they could walk in through the doors of the school and use it to help. So we said we would change that. I started the Stuart Williams Impact Scholars Program there. And the bottom line for the school was that we would enhance enrollment, we would enhance development, we would enhance accreditation and make it more relevant. Just as an aside and as an anecdote, it's quite funny actually, they both looked at me like I was completely mad. They said, well, you know, that sounds great, but there's no way you can do that. And by the way, we don't have any money. which a lot of public schools don't. And my response was, well, I don't actually want any money. I want a classroom and I want a car parking spot because it's really hard to park in Charleston. And that's the deal I have with them today. But suffice it to say that the school really has benefited from this work. The next community stakeholders that we bring into the economy are students. The first class we implemented at the school 6 years ago is called Impact X. It's a 6-credit interdisciplinary class where we have the same number of liberal arts students, computer science students, and business majors. They apply to get into the class. When accepted, they have to learn the 17 SDGs. When they show up to class, they self-select into teams of 3 or 4 students around a shared passion or purpose, which are the SDGs that they're passionate about. And they take the entire semester to build out for-profit innovations that will help the greater Charleston region attain the 1 or more SDGs that they're focused on with their innovation. So they're learning all the normal things that you would in an entrepreneurship class, but it's very much focused on impact. Each team gets a business mentor and a tech mentor from the community. There is a pitch off at the end of every semester where they pitch off for $15,000 of real money to help build their companies. The city is now deeply immersed in this. Every semester, the city provides the top 5 socioeconomic environmental issues that it faces. And if a student team decides to develop an innovation to help with that, the city kicks in an extra $5,000. So it's really been a huge success, and it's now the #1 class, not just at the School of Business and the entire college. I will tell you that the innovations coming out of this class are profound. Many of them will actually make you cry. And you begin to see that we do have hope when young people like this become passionate about solving social and environmental issues. So the students are benefiting, and the innovations that they create start to benefit the community. Next, stakeholders that we bring are community residents. We took the class, we tweaked it ever so slightly, and we teach it for free on a Wednesday evening. We do it 3 times a year in a 12-week cohort. It's an hour and a half every Wednesday night. And any resident of the greater Charleston region can come. If you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see we've had over 600 people take the class with the demographics. And this is when you realize that the people who carry the largest socioeconomic burdens are actually the ones that have the solutions. And shame on us for never believing or trusting in certain demographics of our country that they're capable of innovating, working hard, caring. And so this makes a huge difference. The innovations that come out of this class are every bit as profound as come out of the student class. They're a bit more myopically focused from a geographical standpoint. Sometimes they're not quite as technology advanced, but they're every bit as impactful. And of course, what happens is in trying to increase the velocity of capital, and you'll see a theme that runs through this as we go through, in our marginalized community segments, when these folks go back to their communities to open their businesses, they start to increase the velocity of capital. So we provide them with all the resources they need. We've had everything from doctors at MUSC come in with amazing innovations that they're not quite sure how to purpose and bring to market, right the way through to an African-American lady in her 60s who barely graduated high school, who got funded by Michael Bloomberg. So it does run the gamut. And again, most of the innovations that come into this classroom are meant to fix social, environmental, economic problems that people are really faced with. So that's how we bring residents. Next, we bring impact entrepreneurs. I know there's some people on here that work at schools like Wake Forest, etc. And so at least at the College of Charleston, after 5 o'clock at night, and certainly after noon on a Friday, there is nobody there. And so you have all this space, and you have technology, and you have maker spaces and 3D printers. So what we did was we opened a free impact incubator where graduates from both classes can come in, and by the way, other people, as long as their innovation is impact focused. We have students help the people with technology who haven't been exposed to it before. We have any number of professional service firms provide pro bono advice within the class, within the incubator. And this really allows people to continue with their education and to continue building out their innovations. So that's how we bring impact entrepreneurs. Next, we bring impact investors, and I'm rushing through this a little bit. If you notice, the impact investors are next to the impact entrepreneurs. Direct line of sight, no choke point. When you join this model, you tell us what you care about, and when something comes into the incubator that aligns with your virtues and values, we just let you know and introduce you to the entrepreneurs. This gives the impact investors a deal flow mechanism where they can look at innovations that are very much for profit, but designed to help with things that people care about within their own community. It's much easier to raise regional, national, even global capital if you have local impact investors step up to the plate first. And it's a good source of providing capital to segments of our community that up until recently were ignored by venture capitalists, et cetera, et cetera. My biggest fear coming to Charleston, I'll be honest, was that people at the top of the socioeconomic pyramid would feel that impact investing was just another way to give away their money. But they didn't. It took me no time at all to really get them to realize that over the next 50 years, the greatest accumulation of wealth will probably be amassed by people that innovate solutions for the social and environmental problems we face. And that the future's highest and most sustainable corporate profits will probably be delivered by people that leaders and managers and business owners that embrace management through the lens of profit and purpose. What was difficult was getting around them all. So we created a new event for Charleston. It's called Impact Day Charleston. It's just a 3-quarter day event with a gala dinner in the evening, where we bring in speakers from around the world to educate impact investors. We have scholarships for people to attend, so it is inclusive. And so where people can learn. It's sold out every year, and it's important to note that we donated the event to the school so that when people buy a ticket or they sponsor it or buy a table at the dinner, all the proceeds go to the college. But it goes into an endowment at the college that's been set up where the college can only use it for one reason, and that's to get more students. So, for example, this year we're doubling the size of the student class to increase the size of the community class and to provide more services and increase the size of the incubator. So you're beginning to see how this becomes a bit circular. Next up, businesses. I, for one, have been an entrepreneur and a business owner, and I'm sort of tired of people maligning business all the time. Businesses are really, really important stakeholders. Just take some of these numbers. There's 16 million businesses in the US. They employ 129 million people. They touch every single community that we have. Obviously, they touch the environment. So decisions made by business leaders are truly important. And so I wanted to bring businesses into this new economy in a way where instead of asking them for things all the time, that we actually provided some benefit again to companies, but if the companies benefit, other people would also. So we designed something called a Corporate Impact Index. It's an online consulting tool of about 250 questions that businesses can complete online. Now, there is a fee to complete it, and it's based upon a company's revenues. It's quite nominal. We use undergrad students to help steward the company through the index. And what does that do? That embeds them in the business community for internships and potential jobs when they graduate. And we do it with community residents as well. When a company has completed the index, they get a score. That index is broken into different segments. How are you impacting your top line, bottom line, gross margin? How are you impacting your brand equity, brand value? How are you impacting your employees, all segments of your community, the environment, your supply chain, etc. This is a bit like B Corps on steroids. It is not a self-assessment. So when it's complete, we go back to the company and give them their score. Now, if they score 80% or above, there's really not a lot we can do to help them. It's a really good company. It's a really good actor. We write them a report. We give them some free advice, and we accredit them in the community so that people can see, wow, I should probably frequent that business because look what they're giving back. If they score less than 80%, we offer to enter into a consulting assignment with them. Again, the fee is based upon their revenue, and we have a matrix of what that looks like. We are, to be a bit boastful, because we kind of created the thesis of make a profit while making a difference, we are really good at this. When we consult to a company, we come back with solutions. It's a bit pithy, but it's called the Impact Bucket Challenge. And so the solutions are put into 3 buckets. Bucket A, you can implement these within the next 2 months. It will cost you nothing, and hence your return is almost infinitesimal. Set bucket B, these things will have a cost, not material, and you can implement them over, 0 to 6 months. And then bucket C, these are material costs and can be implemented over a year. And so you go from infinitesimal return to above market return to normalized return if the company decides to embrace all the solutions we suggest. Now, we all know that when the companies that do this benefit from everything you see on the left-hand side. Our fees are obviously much less than, and we have a Deloitte partner on here, and understandably our fees are a lot less than the big consulting firms. But more importantly, when we certify people in impact economics in their communities, 95% of the fees that they generate stay in that community. They're not shipped off to Boston or New York or Washington, D.C. That's point number 1. And that's important to help increase the velocity of capital where they are. Secondarily, we don't receive, or our certified consultants don't receive 100% of the fees. So a company will take 15% of the fee that they were going to pay, and they'll make a direct tax-deductible contribution to the school. In our case, it's CFC, and in our certified consultants' cases, it's the schools of their choice. To do what? They can only be used to increase the circle. They take 5% and they give it to a local not-for-profit, probably a donor-advised fund or something like that, that acts as an impact investment fund. And it can only be used to fund innovations coming out of the incubator. So again, you're beginning to see now how this is circular. I need to say that everything up through the impact investor stage is all pro bono work. And it's a lot of work. So it doesn't actually become self-funding, and you don't actually start making a living until you bring corporations. But I'll get to how that becomes short-circuited at the end of this. So that's corporations. We then bring not-for-profits. When we've done the work with the corporations, we totally understand the DNA of that company. So it's very easy for us to introduce a corporation to a not-for-profit stewarding initiative that aligns with their virtues and values. That does not mean, and I have to stress this, that the company's going to make financial donations to that not-for-profit. I mean, they might, it's up to them. But it generally means that they'll encourage their employees to direct their paid and unpaid community service hours at that company, at that not-for-profit, I beg your pardon. And of course, we have students and community residents that like to volunteer for things they care about. So that's how we help with not-for-profits. Next up, and this is penultimate, government. We like it or not, governments are hugely important stakeholders in our communities. And again, we wanted to bring them into this new economy where they can benefit. So just as we have a corporate impact index, we have a city or community impact index. Same thing applies. Cities can complete it, but this one has about 350 questions, because not only are you accrediting the city as an organization, you're actually looking at it, things, how inclusive is it, what is it doing in the city? Again, we use students to help. And then similarly, if a city scores 80% or above, that's fantastic. If they don't, we enter into a consulting assignment so we can get them to 80%. We then work with the city to put in place a program where any company scoring 80% and above can get some kind of financial incentive to remain and grow. Or if the city has an economic development group that goes around the country, or in Charlotte's case, go around the world, I'm sure, trying to get companies to locate there. If those companies score 80% or above, there's another program that those companies can benefit from capital. However, the capital can only be used to hire people that reside in the most marginalized segments of the community. So that's how we bring the government. And then finally, the CS is community segment. So we predetermine the most marginalized segments of our community, the ones that need the most help. And then all of this is targeted at that community segment, and you end up with impact economics. So every stakeholder has is included. There are initiatives for each one to benefit, but when one benefits, all benefit. And it's important to us that every resident eventually is at least provided with the opportunity to participate in, and just as importantly, personally benefit from this creation of a sustainable future that we need. All we have to do is look at any community in the world that has a very, very high velocity of capital. And of course, you don't see food deserts, right? You don't see lack of access to transportation, education, healthcare, crime rates are lower. And so for us, our myopic model is on changing the economic paradigm and empowering people to rise themselves up. How do we scale this? I did not want to build another global company. And I also wanted to ensure that things were in place. Again, I didn't want all the money flying back to Charleston, South Carolina. So our lawyers actually came up with a certification program where we certify individuals. We've started discussing with foundations that want to get certified, cities themselves, so that people can go and build their own businesses in community, people that have lived there for a long time, that understand the culture, that understand how things work. And certainly so that all the capital that's expended on this it remains in place, well, 95% of it. We do charge to certify people to be transparent. It's $10,000 to get certified. You get all the blueprints, the licensing agreement, everything you need to put this in your own community. And it comes with 100% scholarship. So if someone takes a certification, they can nominate someone on a needs basis to also be certified. Because what we found is that many of the people that want to be certified, I'll just pick one and he won't mind me using his name, Stuart Valentine, who's a wealth manager in Fairfield, Iowa. He has a job. He just can't possibly do all the work. So he got certified and nominated someone who was appropriate, actually from a marginalized segment of that community, to do the work and to build it out. And then InPlace Impact receives a 5% royalty or licensing fee, if you want to call it that, on the consulting revenues. And that's all for ongoing training and ongoing meetings, etc. And that's it. If we get this to scale, and that scale for us is globally, we're already working with the country of Ghana, we're in Liberia, Honduras, Guatemala, etc. the global consultants will cause this to happen annually. Now, this is a big ask, and this will take years to get to this stage, but $2 billion a year will be directed to fund integrated impact studies at schools around the world. 1 million students a year would take integrated impact studies. 2 million residents every Wednesday night would be going to those free community classes. $600 million would fund local community impact innovations. About 2,500 new impact-focused companies would be launched and get traction every year. 150,000 companies each year would adopt leadership and management philosophy of profit and purpose. And 1,000 communities a year would start working on attaining the SDGs. So that's the potential scale. And on that note, I'll stop sharing my screen here and jump back with you all, and you can all ask as many questions as you want. There you go.
Hi, Stuart. This is Henry Rock. Well, I'm sorry, Jennifer, were you about to say something?
Oh, the only thing I was going to say is that I'm recording this, and I will send everybody a copy so they can
great.
do it again if they need to.
Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect.
Go ahead, Henry.
Stuart, thank you for this incredible vision and taking action on what is undoubtedly a heavy lift. And I have a couple of things that I'm curious about. And first and foremost, well, I'll say this. I like the fact that you have sort of democratized this notion of innovation. And I think that one of the things that often happens is that I've been saying that innovation, the idea of innovation has been hijacked by high tech and high growth companies. And I think that innovation really is much more about problem solving. So this is one of the things that I find very intriguing about this. One of the questions, though, that I have is about the extent to which cooperatives, cooperatively owned and operated ventures is something that you're looking at either weaving into this, or have you considered this as a possibility? And the reason I say that is because it seems it's sort of evident to me that when we create companies that are led by founders and co-founders, that there's still a bit of a hierarchical structure there. You've got folks at the top, and then you've got the workers at the bottom. And when we are dealing with issues around socioeconomic mobility and so forth, such as we are here in Charlotte, it seems to me that a more democratized approach to economy is what's needed. Certainly, we need, in my estimation, we need to really be considering this as a possibility. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are about that. Mm-hmm. And lastly, I'm wondering how this might overlay with this whole issue around opportunity zones, mm-hmm. where that is currently a thing. And in fact, down there in South Carolina, mm-hmm. Senator Tim Scott has been a proponent of that. So anyway, I'll shut up and thank you.
I think I can answer those two questions quite quickly. Opportunity zones were set up to benefit really one sector of our society, and that is real estate, commercial real estate investors, right? And if you go look at the returns from opportunity zones, that's where you'll see most of those returns are going. People can run around and sing and dance about opportunity zones all they want, but the people that live in those opportunity zones, the actual residents, they're not benefiting as it was meant to be. So we have to look at tweaking that. I'm not saying it's terrible, but it's a start. But we've got to make sure again that the people that they were meant to benefit actually do benefit. In terms of cooperatives, what you'll notice when you do the student classes and the community classes, that people gravitate towards each other, because in the community class, we don't show people the 17 SDGs and say, pick one like we do with the students, the residents come with their own innovations for the problems that they face. So they already have their innovations. But what you see is many of them overlap. And so one of the structures that we teach, both in the student class and in the community class, is that cooperative structure. Now, I will be honest and say we don't mandate that they have to go the cooperative route, but we certainly give them the option. When you have 30, 40, 50 people in a class and 4 or 5 of them are trying to do the same thing, we really stress collaboration over competition. And one of the best models to enable that to happen is the cooperative model. Any other questions?
I know you saw, Stuart, in the chat that Dana Roselli has had some of your graduates.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Tilliard Milburn and Chad Ross were Impact Sense. Yep.
I didn't realize it was the Stuart Williams.
I can't take any credit for that. I mean, as you can see, this has been our passion it's been my family's passion for a long, long, long time. So we're just happy we can give back and help young people in that instance, right?
Well, Dan, maybe it's supposed to be Sir Stuart Williams.
Not at all.
So 2 questions. Charlotte is one of the most churched communities in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that in your circle, even when you expanded to the big circle, the faith communities weren't involved. Is that intentional, or is that an opportunity?
No, they actually are involved. We just include them in the not-for-profit circle. And that's a really great question. I didn't know that North Charleston was actually its own city until I moved to Charleston. I thought it was, North Charleston, right? The people who are accredited in North Charleston are the pastors of a very large church called North Palm Church. Mm-hmm. Because they quite rightly know that they have a hub, which is a community hub, which is perfect for this model. Now, they've partnered with Charleston Southern University, because that's in North Charleston. That's the educational institution they've chosen. But we've got many requests, actually, from church groups to be the certified consultants in their region. So churches are important. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Second follow-up question. When you talk about the universities, we have Johnson C. Smith, which is an HBCU. We've got UNCC, which is part of the state university system, and then Dan and others are involved in Wake Forest, which is a private university.
Mm-hmm.
If you were starting this in Charlotte and you had those 3 options and you really wanted to have the most impact, which one of those universities would you target and why?
Well, I would go to the historically Black college, because I think that the students, when they leave that school, where do they go back? A lot of them will go back to the communities that need most help. Now, I didn't realize Wake Forest was in Charlotte. I thought that was like somewhere else.
Well, Dan and some others bring it to Charlotte. We'll call it Charlotte Light.
Okay. So the way that we've set this up, and we have a whole map, is we looked at every state, and we wanted to give every certified consultant about, it's not exact, but about plus or minus 10,000 companies that they could potentially go and consult to and do this work with. And so we broke down every state by the number of companies in that state, population, etc. And that's how we determine how many certified consultants we can have in each state. So you could easily have someone in the Wake Forest area dealing with Wake Forest on the main campus, and you could have a couple of people in Charlotte. Charlotte's probably big enough to have 2 or maybe even 4 licensed, certified consultants dealing with different colleges. The College of Charleston and CSU University are probably not even 20 miles apart. but they service different regions. So, we've now obviously got College of Charleston, and we've got Charleston Southern, and geographically they're very close, but they do serve different regions.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Stuart?
Yep.
How do you measure the success of your program? And do you have metrics and whatnot over the past 6 years you could share with the group so we can kind of see how things are going? Or
Yes, well, we just finished the pilot last year, actually. And the last piece of it for us was finishing the City Impact Index with the City of Charleston and the mayor. From an economic standpoint, what we've seen is numerous people from both the student class and the community class launch their businesses. Now, obviously, with what's going on at the moment, their growth has been slowed, and you can only hope that some of them, as startups, actually make it through this period of time. However, when you go into the community groups, the community leaders, and you're welcome to come down here anytime you want and see it all working. We are using students actually to track the velocity of capital, and we were starting to do that, of course, and then everything got shut down. So the velocity, it's an unfair metric right now to track that. But as soon as COVID passes and the country opens up, we'll get back on that, because that is one of the key components of this, is rising economic vibrancy. We've had a lot of success, both corporates and communities, in buying into this. I mean, Charleston has bought into this in a big way, from the mayor, all the way down. So our metrics, when we started doing them, got interrupted, like many other things, by COVID. One of the great outcomes that we've seen, and another little bit of an anecdote. So when we teach the classes, especially the community class, we talk a lot about people invest in jockeys, not the horses, right? So they invest in people. I mean, you've got to have a good horse, but people are investing in people. And we also teach in the community class, if you have a great innovation that's working, don't immediately go and run off and try and dilute it, meaning don't kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, right? So we talk about jockeys and geese. And so over a period of 3 classes, a group from West Ashley started something, and you can go and see it on Facebook, called the Charleston Goose Jockeys, believe it or not. And it's a community collaborative, and they now have about 100 members. And you should see what they're achieving in their small, marginalized segment of West Ashley. It is absolutely unbelievable what they've been doing. And so that's something I never really saw coming out of this, right? I keep being surprised. But what they've done, and talking about cooperatives, is, there are people in there that are carpenters, or there's people in there that are plumbers, there's people in there that are artists, they're educators. So what they're doing is they're all helping each other with no money changing hands. Frankly, it's incredible to watch. And by the way, all colors, all races, all religions seated at the same table. It's fantastic. But yes, in fact, the MBA program at C of C is now, one of the projects that they're doing is they're building out metrics for us and ways in which to measure them efficiently, rather than in any kind of cumbersome methodology.
thank you.
Stuart, I can add that Kevin and David are actually part of a co-working group that sounds somewhat like when you have the small businesses and the artists and the entrepreneurs helping each other. Some of that's going on at Advent, some of that's going on at Packard Place, some of that's going on with City Startup Labs. We have pieces of all of that, and it sounds like we could really accelerate some of that.
Someone asked me, am I familiar with Noisette? I am, yes. I've met with the folks at Noisette. That was his name always escapes me. He's the gentleman that went to the seminary in Princeton and came down here and has done a great job in Noisette. Another question here, can you share metrics? Okay, we just discussed that. Which education institution? We just discussed that.
Yeah, I'm just taking notes in the chat.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. I think
I'm summarizing.
what we have found is that no matter what community you go to, there are people doing parts of all of this, right? So you'll generally find, a startup lab, you'll generally find an incubator. Colleges may have embraced impact entrepreneurship, but they certainly embraced entrepreneurship. So there's little bits of all of it kind of flying around in each community. But what we see is they often don't collaborate, they're not connected. And what we looked at from our global research was we need a model where everyone's rowing in the same direction, and benefit for one is not left to happen chance that it's benefit for all. So.
Stuart, is your, oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
No.
No, go ahead, Kevin. I'll go in after you.
No, I've already asked a question. Your turn.
All right. Stuart, Mark Weber, I had mentioned I serve on the board with Social Venture Partners, Charlotte affiliate. Have you had any interaction with Social Venture Partners in Charleston or elsewhere across the globe?
In Charleston, only to the extent that one of the not-for-profits that we help them put together their, I don't know what you would call it, appeal, or not appeal, when you fill out those, to get a grant application for Social Venture Network in Charleston. And I'm pleased to say they were successful in getting their money. So that was great. But that's the only extent.
Great, thank you. And the second question I have is, are you familiar with the work of the Business Roundtable?
We are absolutely very familiar. In fact, we've consulted to that organization a little bit informally. We were not part of the big signature a year and a half ago, where 184 of them, signed the treatise, the promise. But we have spoken to people at the Business Roundtable about getting all 200 companies, in fact, to take the Corporate Impact Index.
Great. And we've got, I think, probably based on just a quick check I did, maybe 5 of the organizations. I'm throwing Wells Fargo in as the 5. It's 5 very prominent companies here in Charlotte. Those CEOs are members of the Business Roundtable.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. We, funny enough, where we thought that it would just be individuals that would want to become certified. But of course, now what's happening, especially with COVID and people looking ahead, we're getting requests from foundations, we're getting requests from cities and corporations, funny enough, that want to fund the certification for certain people. Now, of course, in those instances, they want to nominate the people in their community who become certified, and that's totally fine. But again, with transparency, we have to approve those certifications. That little tidbit was put in because I've met with the president of Ghana twice now, because the country of Ghana wants to fund the certifications for the entire country. And some of the people they've nominated to be accredited, I mean, I had to say to the president, surely you jest, right? I mean, we can't accredit like this person and this person because you just Google them on the internet and they spent whatever time in jail for arms dealers or something. So we do have to approve, but I think 99% of the time, the people that are nominated are really great people. They're really capable. They're in community. They're in place. So.
I was going to say we have about 10 more minutes. I know we're over the hour, but the questions are still coming. So we can all hang in 10 more minutes. I'll send everybody this recording. Absolutely, Stuart, I think that you have sparked a lot of thinking and pondering and energy here. But any more questions?
When we open back up, you know, in a way where we can have guests. You're all welcome to come down to Charleston and, you know, meet the president of the college, meet the dean of the business school, meet some business leaders, meet residents of all our community segments. The best time to come is actually, well, it used to be Wednesdays. This semester it'll be a Thursday, because that's the day where we hold the Impact X class. We'll be holding the community class on a Thursday evening. So you in one day you can see pretty much most of it, you know, rather than making multiple trips.
So Stuart, this is Henry again. The focus on environment, out of the projects that you've seen, what percentage of those were dealt with environmental impact?
Probably about 35%. You know, use that word justice again for a second. Environmental justice is the big one. The young people, especially the students, there's more environmental, I suppose, adoption in the student class, because they get to pick, right? They get to look at the 17 SDGs and they'll say, okay, life on land or life underwater. Whereas the community residents are coming with things that they've lived. And many of those are not so environmentally focused. There are some, but many of them focus on issues that those residents believe are more pressing at this moment in time to them personally and their neighbors than environmental issues. So I would say 35% overall, probably skewed a little over 40% in the student class and maybe a little under 30% in the community class.
Good question. I always want to hear about environment as well. For sure.
Stuart, I think I missed part of this in your presentation, but I'm just trying to understand your business model as far as how your organization gets paid.
Well,
You basically find organizations that want to pick an individual and pay you 10 grand per individual to get trained. And then those individuals become essentially consultants under your umbrella that go sell work, and you get 5% of their work sold forever indefinitely, right? Is there other streams that I missed?
Nope, that's it. That's cool. My family and I, after I sold the firm I started, we funded all of this, and it kind of got pretty heavy, and we had to find a way to make it self-funding, right? As we go along. So that really is that's the certification piece. We hold weekly, and they're optional, webinars like this for consultants. They can ask questions. They can ask us to take a deeper dive into certain things if they want. When COVID lifts, we'll be holding events and annual events in person for consultants to come share best practices. There's another piece to this that if you're certified, if you want to, in the incubator, even though there's no fees, you are at liberty to take up to, we suggest this, up to 5% equity in any company that comes through the incubator for the work that you're doing, right? If you do that, we suggest that another 2.5% is donated to whatever that donor advised fund is, whatever that local community fund that's acting as an impact investment fund. That 2.5% is donated into that. So if there is a realization one day and some liquidity, that money goes into that fund that can be recycled back to future innovations coming out of the incubator.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? And like any other what's next for Charlotte?
We have certified people in the Sandhills region of North Carolina. They live literally just outside of the village of Pinehurst. So we are in North Carolina already.
So what would be, Stuart, what would be the logical first step if there are, you know, people in the entrepreneurial space and investment space who think that this should expand in Charlotte? What would be the logical next step?
Well, what I should do is go back to my team and say, okay, based on the size of Charlotte, and I know it's a very big city is how many certifications can Charlotte have? Well, I'll just make it up. But let's say it's 4, right? So 2 would be paid for, 2 would be scholarship. We would then, the certification course is a week long, and it is intense and it's immersive. And then the person's certified, and then they go back and they start building their own company. Now, it's up to the people with the certifications how they structure that company. Do they make it a cooperative? Do they make it an LLC? Do they, we suggest, at least down here, try and make it at least make it for us, South Carolina Public Benefit Corporation or something like that. Some people want to make it a not-for-profit. I mean, that's entirely up to them because it's their business, and we don't dictate how they run their business. And so you would get together and do that, and then it's a matter of doing the work. Now, what we've discovered is because we have the model in Charleston, so this is what is happening in North Charleston. Patricia Estes is the certified consultant there with her team. They went to CSU, and CSU liked the Impact X program so much, they're making a capstone program that you have to take to graduate. But of course, you can't do that immediately. You have to wait for scheduling in the next academic year. So what they did was they went to CSU, they've agreed upon the affiliation, they've agreed upon a date when the Impact X class will be started for the students. Of course, CSU it was easy for them to give them a classroom, so they now have a date certain to start the community class. They picked a future date to do Impact Day North Charleston. And so they've got these things in place. So now they can go to corporations immediately and say, we're here to help you. And this is the model that you're going to be a part of, even though it's not fully built out yet. Because they can point to what they've done in North Charleston with all these dates that they have that can be confirmed by the college. And then all they have to do is say to the company, well, if you want to see it fully built out, there it is in Charleston, South Carolina. That's what we're doing here. So the corporations can benefit immediately, and they as consultants can start generating revenue almost immediately without having to wait until corporations would ordinarily get put into the economy, which is quite late in the game, as you see. So they're just expediting the rate at which they'll be able to start generating revenue.
Well, I would bet that between City Startup Labs and Social Venture Partners and Packard Place, et cetera, I would bet that one of us has an idea of somebody who might be interested in getting certified.
Yeah.
So that sounds like a good next step.
But remember, Jennifer, it's 2 people, right? So if you pay for 1, it's actually 2. And if you pay for 2, it's actually 4. So my advice would be to get them to do it as a team at the same time.
Well, what I can offer to do is host another Zoom meeting for folks who've been on this call to talk about how we might do that next step. Stuart, you have been terrific in taking this time with us, and your presentation is recorded. I'll share it around. We will
Please do.
talk about this, and I'm pretty excited. I think the timing couldn't be better. We're trying to build back better. We're trying to build a better, more sustainable, more balanced economy for everyone as we come out of this crisis. And this is only one crisis. We'll face many more. We know that climate change will bring more pandemics. We know that we still have quite a lot of work to do on racial justice. And this could be woven in very well. I absolutely believe it. And I appreciate, I sent David Frost to talk to you, and he's the one that got me willing to have this conversation broadly. And so appreciate that. And I think David's willing to put some time into it as well. We have so many creative minds in Charlotte. And again, I did invite some women that couldn't make it this time, but we have a lot of creative women here too. And we'll make sure that they're engaged as well.
Well, thank you for all you guys are doing too, all of you. I mean, it takes a village, right? There's not one person can do this. And so thank you for all you're trying to do. And We just have to be inclusive. We just have to get inclusion. And by the way, my favorite part of the whole thing is the community class.
Mm-hmm.
I'm biased towards the community class.
Yeah.
Everything else is great. I like working with companies. I love working with young people and students. But that community class, I mean, boy, it tugs at your heartstrings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Terrific. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Anybody have any last question before I sign us off and send you all a copy? The recording takes about an hour to get on the cloud, and then I'll send it out. Any other final questions? Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Jennifer. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
We'll be in touch. Everybody have a safe 4th of July.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.